What if I told you that the most dangerous thing Jesus ever shared was not a miracle, not a parable, but a sentence so expansive that reality itself could not hold it? Hidden in plain sight, buried beneath centuries of doctrine and dust, there is a quiet line attributed to Jesus that most people read and immediately pass over. Yet the gospel itself warns us. If everything he said were written down, the world itself could not contain the books. This is not poetic exaggeration. It is a clue, a crack in the surface of history, hinting that what was transmitted was not information, but initiation. Tonight, we are stepping into what many mystics call the Forbidden Saying 17, a teaching so vast it does not fit into language, scripture, or institutions. A form of knowledge not meant to be believed, but activated. A knowing that expands the knower beyond the limits of the world they inhabit. This is not the Jesus of stained glass and sermons. This is the teacher who spoke in riddles, because truth, when spoken plainly, becomes dangerous. The one who warned that eyes would see but not perceive, ears would hear but not understand, because understanding, once it happens, cannot be undone. Across centuries, fragments of this teaching have surfaced in apocryphal gospels, desert monasteries, Gnostic hymns, and whispered initiations, and almost without exception, they were labeled heretical, mystical, or forbidden, not because they were false, but because they worked. In this video, we will explore why this saying was never meant to be fully written, how it points to a state of consciousness rather than a belief system, and why the world itself cannot contain it, not physically, but psychologically. We will trace its echoes through lost texts and ancient wisdom traditions, and uncover what happens when a human being begins to embody knowledge that dissolves the boundaries of self, time, and fear. But understand this before we proceed. This is not passive content. What you are about to hear is not designed to inform you. It is designed to disturb something dormant within you. And once disturbed, it does not easily return to sleep. To understand why this saying was considered forbidden, we must first step outside the familiar timeline of official Christianity and into the shadowed corridors of early spiritual history. Before doctrine hardened, before councils voted on truth, before mystery was replaced with certainty. In the earliest centuries after Jesus' death, there was no single Christianity. There were many. Some communities saw Jesus as a divine sacrifice. Others saw him as a revealer of hidden wisdom. These groups preserved sayings, dialogues, and initiations that never made it into the canon. Texts like the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, and the Sophia of Jesus Christ, documents discovered centuries later in places like Nag Hammadi, paint a radically different picture of his mission. In these texts, Jesus is not primarily concerned with sin or salvation in the modern sense. He speaks instead of gnosis, direct knowing, not belief, not faith, knowing. He tells his students that the kingdom is not coming later, not descending from the sky, but already spread out upon the earth, invisible to those who cannot perceive it. This alone threatened every power structure built on mediation, hierarchy, and control. Now consider the philosophical implications of the statement. The world could not contain the books. In ancient thought, the world did not merely mean the physical earth. It meant the ordered system of reality, what the Greeks called the cosmos. To say the cosmos itself could not contain the knowledge is to suggest something fundamentally destabilizing, that this knowledge exceeds systems, structures, and even reality as we experience it. This idea was not unique to Jesus. It appears in ancient Egypt, where initiates were warned that certain truths could fracture the unprepared mind. In India's Upanishads, It is said that Brahman, the ultimate reality, is that from which words return, having failed to reach it. In Plato's esoteric teachings, the highest truths were never written down at all, only transmitted orally to those who had undergone inner preparation. Why? Because some knowledge is not additive, it is subtractive. It does not give you something new, it takes something away. It dissolves the illusion of separation, identity, and permanence. And once those illusions collapse, a person is no longer easily governed. This is why, as the institutional church gained power, these teachings became dangerous. A believer can be guided, a knower cannot. A follower needs authority. A realized individual becomes their own source. So the knowledge was not destroyed, it was buried, encoded into parables, fragmented across texts, hidden behind metaphors of seeds, light, mirrors, and doors. Only those who had ears to hear would recognize that these were not moral stories, but maps of consciousness. The forbidden nature of the saying, then, was never about blasphemy. It was about capacity. The world, meaning the collective human psyche, was not ready to hold it. And perhaps even now, it still isn't. Because once you grasp what Jesus was truly pointing toward, the question is no longer, what do I believe? It becomes something far more unsettling. Who am I when all beliefs fall away? And that is where the real journey begins. To approach the forbidden saying, we must first abandon the idea that it is a sentence meant to be memorized. It is not a quote to be recited. It is a threshold. And like all thresholds, it only reveals itself when crossed. When the gospel claims that the world could not contain the fullness of what Jesus gave, it is pointing to a form of knowledge that expands the one who receives it. Imagine pouring water into a cup. The cup remains the same size, but now imagine a teaching that turns the cup into the ocean. The container is no longer sufficient because the container itself has been transformed. This is the nature of initiatory knowledge. Jesus often spoke of seeds. A seed looks insignificant, almost empty. Yet inside, it is encoded an entire forest. If you tried to contain that forest in a book, or a law, or a doctrine, you would fail. The seed must be planted, not analyzed. And the human mind, in this teaching, is the soil. The forbidden saying points to an awakening process in which perception itself is altered, not metaphorically, literally. The ancient mystics understood consciousness as layered. Most people live on the surface layer, where identity is fixed, time is linear, and reality feels solid. But beneath this surface are deeper strata, where self and world begin to blur. This is why Jesus said things that appear contradictory. Whoever finds their life will lose it. The last shall be first. I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. These are not ethical statements. They are descriptions of what happens when consciousness turns inward and discovers that the observer and the observed are not separate. Think of a mirror that forgets it is a mirror and believes it is only an image. This is the human condition. The knowledge Jesus transmitted was the shock that reminds the mirror of its reflective nature. Once that happens, the image no longer has power over it. And this is why the knowledge cannot be contained by the world. The world is built on images, roles, names, histories, fears. Awakening dissolves their absolute authority. A person who sees through the illusion still participates in the world, but is no longer imprisoned by it. Yet Jesus rarely explained this directly. Instead, he spoke in parables, because parables bypass the intellect and speak to something deeper. The intellect seeks containment. It wants definitions. But this knowledge resists definition because it is experiential. You cannot hand someone fire by describing heat. They must feel it. In this sense, The forbidden saying is not hidden because it is secret. It is hidden because it is obvious only after awakening. Before that, it sounds like poetry or exaggeration. After that, it becomes a precise description of reality. And here is the unsettling part. Once this process begins, it cannot be reversed. You cannot unsee what you have seen. This is why initiatory traditions warned students repeatedly, not because the truth is evil, but because it is irreversible. So the question is no longer whether the world could contain this knowledge. The question becomes, can you? And that leads us deeper into the paradox at the heart of the teaching itself. At the heart of the forbidden saying lies a paradox that unsettles the rational mind. The knowledge Jesus transmitted does not add meaning to the world. It empties the world of false meaning so that something vast can be revealed underneath. This is where many interpretations fail. They search for hidden doctrines, secret cosmologies, or lost prophecies. But the most disruptive aspect of this teaching is far simpler and far more dangerous. It reveals that reality, as most people experience it, is provisional. Jesus hinted at this repeatedly. Heaven and earth will pass away. Before Abraham was, I am. The kingdom is within you. These are not theological claims in the modern sense. They are statements about levels of awareness. When consciousness shifts, time loosens, identity softens. The boundary between inner and outer dissolves. This is why the teaching could not be contained by the world. The world depends on stable identities, past, present, future, ruler and subject, sacred and profane. But awakening collapses these divisions, and systems built on division cannot survive those who see beyond them. Here is the misconception that must be addressed. This is not an escape from life. It is a deeper immersion into it. Many believe mystical knowledge leads to withdrawal, detachment, or indifference. In truth, it produces clarity. When you are no longer trapped by the illusion of a separate self, fear loses its grip. And without fear, perception becomes sharp, compassionate, and precise. Ancient critics of these teachings accused them of being nihilistic. They misunderstood. To dissolve false meaning is not to destroy meaning. It is to uncover the source from which all meaning arises, the silence beneath thought, the awareness beneath identity. Some Gnostic texts describe this moment as remembering, not learning something new, but recognizing something forgotten. This aligns with Jesus' repeated insistence that the truth will set you free, not reward you, not comfort you, free you. Freedom in this sense is terrifying to institutions and intoxicating to individuals. There is another layer to the paradox. The more this knowledge expands within a person, the less it can be communicated. Words begin to fail. Language fractures. This is why mystics across traditions resorted to poetry, contradiction, and silence. Not to be obscure, but to be accurate. When Jesus said that the world could not contain what he gave, he was also pointing to the failure of language itself. Books, doctrines, and sermons are maps, but this knowledge is the territory. And once you stand in it, maps feel painfully inadequate. This is also why persecution followed these ideas wherever they surfaced. Not because they opposed morality, but because they undermined control. A person who knows directly does not need intermediaries, no gatekeepers, no fear-based incentives. And yet, the teaching was never meant for everyone at once. Do not cast pearls before swine, he warned, not as an insult, but as a statement of readiness. Some truths, when encountered too early, become distorted or rejected. The seed must meet fertile ground. So the forbidden saying is not locked away by force. It is self-concealing. It reveals itself only to those who have reached a certain inner stillness. a willingness to let go of who they think they are. Which brings us to the most pressing question of all. If this knowledge is real, if it still works, if it still awakens, how do you begin to live it here, now, in the world that cannot contain it? That is where practice begins. If this knowledge cannot be contained by books or beliefs, then it must be embodied. And embodiment does not begin with grand rituals or dramatic awakenings. It begins with subtle, almost invisible shifts in how you relate to your own experience. The first practice is inner listening, not prayer as asking, but listening as allowing. Set aside 10 minutes each day to sit in silence, not to think about God, truth, or meaning, but to notice the space in which thoughts arise. Do not fight the mind, watch it. As you do, something unexpected happens. You begin to sense that you are not your thoughts, but the awareness observing them. This is not philosophy, it is direct perception, and it is the doorway. The second practice is identity fasting. For brief moments throughout the day, gently release your labels, your name, your role, your story. Ask quietly, who am I before the sentence I am finishes itself? Do not answer, feel. This creates cracks in the rigid structure of selfhood, allowing a deeper intelligence to emerge. At first, this can feel disorienting. That is normal. You are loosening an illusion that has felt solid your entire life. Next comes seeing the world as parable. Jesus spoke in parables because reality itself functions like one. Every encounter, irritation, attraction, or fear is revealing something about the inner state from which you are operating. Instead of reacting automatically, pause and ask, what is this moment reflecting back to me? This transforms daily life into a living scripture, one written specifically for you. There is also a crucial ethical dimension, often overlooked. Awakening without grounding can lead to arrogance or detachment. That is why compassion is not optional, it is evidence. When the sense of separation softens, empathy becomes natural. Practice small, deliberate acts of presence. Listening without preparing a response, helping without seeking recognition, speaking truth without aggression. These anchor insight into action. Obstacles will arise. The most common is fear, fear of losing control, identity, or certainty. Understand this clearly. Nothing real is lost. What dissolves is the false structure that caused suffering in the first place. Another obstacle is spiritual pride, the belief that you now know something others do not. This is simply the ego wearing sacred clothing. If it appears, notice it and let it pass. Above all, resist the urge to rush. This knowledge unfolds organically. Forcing it leads to distortion. Ancient traditions emphasized preparation for a reason. Depth requires patience. When practiced sincerely, these simple actions begin to rewire perception. Life feels lighter, yet more vivid. Challenges still exist, but they no longer define you. You begin to sense why the world cannot contain this knowledge, because it does not fit into a life lived on autopilot. It demands presence. It demands honesty. It demands courage. And if you continue, something remarkable happens. You realize you were never trying to reach the kingdom. You were learning how to see it. What Jesus offered was never meant to be stored, archived, or agreed upon. It was meant to be lived. That is why the world could not contain it. Worlds are made of structures, names, beliefs, fears, hierarchies. This knowledge dissolves structures not by force, but by clarity. And clarity is unstoppable. We have traced the echoes of the forbidden saying through lost texts and silenced traditions. We have seen how it points not to a distant heaven, but to a radical shift in awareness, one that collapses the illusion of separation and reveals a depth of being beyond time, identity, and fear. Not a belief to defend, but a truth to encounter directly. And perhaps the most unsettling realization is this: nothing about this knowledge is new. It has always been here, quietly waiting beneath the noise of thought. The reason it feels forbidden is not because it is hidden, but because it asks you to let go of who you think you are. The world cannot contain it because the world runs on certainty. This knowledge thrives in openness. The world rewards conformity. This knowledge awakens individuality without isolation. The world teaches you to seek meaning outside yourself. This knowledge returns you to the source from which meaning arises. So the question is no longer whether Jesus gave knowledge too vast for the world. The question is whether you are willing to become vast enough to receive it, not tomorrow, not after more study, but now, right here, in the silent space between your thoughts, where no book can reach and no authority can follow. If this resonated with you, do not rush to explain it away. Sit with it. Let it work on you quietly. And if you feel called, continue the exploration through contemplation, through practice, through lived awareness. If you found value in this journey, engage with it. Reflect. Share your insight. And if you wish to walk further into these hidden teachings, stay close, because what we've uncovered tonight is only a fragment. After all, if the world could not contain it, perhaps it was never meant to, and perhaps neither were you.